Today, we continue to build our Dynasty Rookie Rankings with some expert scouting reports on the top quarterbacks in the 2023 NFL Draft. We'll be using the consensus rookie rankings from the Football Guys website as our starting point, okay? So this is a little bit of a different exercise. We're going to pit two subsequently ranked quarterbacks against each other, and then we'll vote on which quarterback we rank higher. The winner gets ranked. The loser continues to move down the list. Gentlemen, let's get started with the QB1 here. And based on the Football Guys rankings, it is CJ Stroud versus Bryce Young. Matt, get us started here. Who are you picking between CJ Stroud or Bryce Young?
I think from this standpoint, if you're looking for, if we're talking from a fantasy perspective early on, or really from a real football perspective early on, and we don't know what team a player's going to go to from a scout's point of view, and you're scouting, for a wide range of outcomes, CJ Stroud is the safest pick, because really what you're looking at is a player who really knows how to incorporate all the different types of drops, different elements of the play action game. And so when you transition from college football to the NFL, usually what happens is that the complexity of the defenses, the higher end athletes who are at every position, the volume of the playbook that you have to learn, and the adjustments, and being on the same page with your receivers, all of that requires you to have to process more information at a even faster rate than what you were doing before. And when you're doing that, if you've done any type of complex task in your life, and everyone has, it's like driving. You've learned how to drive. Many of you who are listening to this have driven from at least 10 years, if not 20, 30, or 40. If you were driving, if you're driving in Atlanta or LA, fine, that's cool. But if you're driving in a highway that's like, say, Boston or New York City, but you're doing it at 70, 80 miles an hour, or let's say 150 to 180 miles an hour on a track at Talladega, suddenly all those fundamentals that you knew, if you really don't know them that well, they deteriorate. And the first things that deteriorate for players is drop footwork, drop speed, precision of where they're standing, what their releases look like if they're not strong. And CJ Stroud has the strongest fundamentals of the group right now. So as he makes these transitions, he's less likely to have to think about some of those things. It's just still going to be ingrained in his game. It's not going to deteriorate. So Stroud, I think from that standpoint, those are the things that make him safe.
Yeah, and Stroud, I think, is the guy that everyone looks at as one of the safest in this class. He's very much the Tim Duncan amongst these quarterbacks here, the big fundamental, so to speak. And he's got that really good baseline. But Jordan, I want to talk to you about something that we saw from CJ Stroud that was a bit different from his entire college game, and that was his final collegiate game against Georgia, where we saw a player who looked very different. He was running around. He was a lot more mobile. He is everything that I think, had he been doing that throughout his career, I think fantasy managers, dynasty managers in particular, would be a lot more excited about his potential at the next level. So as an evaluator, when you look at that last game from CJ Stroud, how much weight do you put into a game like that? A big opponent, big stage, and we saw something totally different from it.
Yeah, you don't want to put, every bit of your scouting portfolio into one game when you're playing a defense the caliber of Georgia and watching him be willing to run. It's not that he wasn't capable before. It's the difference between the guys of, the Lamar Jacksons. Obviously, he's an elite athlete, elite runner, and a player like Justin Herbert, who doesn't want to run, is their situational awareness and being able to, or wanting to do it. And for the first time in CJ Stroud's collegiate career, he was willing to, especially when Marvin Harrison went down. When he knew he didn't have that mismatch, it was okay. If they're going man, if they're going to take away, some of my top tier options and Agbuka and some of the receivers that came in, I'm going to be willing runner. And that type of tape helped Justin Herbert in his final collegiate game when he was playing, I believe, Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl. And that's what kind of translated here for CJ Stroud for me, especially since the Big Ten, it's funky when their defenses, like, sometimes they just sell out on the run game. Even against an Ohio State, they'll blitz a ton and you're not matching up against those receivers. So he was throwing to wide open guys. And then some games, Ryan Day would try to throw CJ Stroud into 8 people in coverage. I think it was the Northwestern Big Ten championship 2 years ago where they struggled, and it was because Northwestern was rushing 3 and playing 8 in coverage. And it doesn't matter your receivers, if you have that many people in coverage, 3 players running routes, you should be able to cover them all. So for me, Stroud proved that he can play an elite defense and be able to get it done on the ground, as well as just being smart with the football. And the throws he made to Marvin Harrison were unreal, especially against the top tier corner like Khalid Ringo. So for that was a kind of icing on the cake for Stroud's collegiate career. And it kind of proved to me like, okay, he's in the discussion with Bryce Young. These two guys are going to be going at it for the number one pick.
Yeah, and something you mentioned there, right, is just the difference between being able to run around and do all those things and then actually choosing to do that. And I think that's something that gets lost on the average viewer, the average fantasy manager, is that not that CJ Stroud can't run around, but he was always going for what seemed to be the simpler, safer play, the longer play, and actually sticking to what his playbook had going through his reads and his progressions. And I think that that's something to consider here, right? We always talk about quarterback being, it's almost a position that everyone has given up scouting on because they're like, oh, every time we think there's a safe guy, he's not that safe. And so it's just, maybe it is okay to just actually like the safe prospect here. And all three of us went with CJ Stroud as the number one quarterback for our rankings here. Now, I want to let you guys all know I am giving away a free Football Guys Pro subscription for the year. All you have to do, subscribe to the channel, drop a like on this video, and leave a comment with the hashtag NFL Draft. Every comment you leave will be counted as an entry to win a free Football Guys Pro subscription for the year. So drop as many comments as you like, and let's get some questions in there, right? I'll get back to every single one of those questions, I promise you. And then last thing, check out the audio version of this show where we always have an extra 20 plus minutes of bonus content. This video is going to be a lot shorter than what we do on the audio version, so you won't see that stuff here on YouTube. You can click the link in the description or just go to wherever you get your podcast and search Pretend GM. Gentlemen, let's move on to our quarterback number 2. And we've got a matchup here of polar opposites. Little man Bryce Young or the big athletic freak Anthony Richardson. Matt, I'm going to let you start us off here because before I even asked this question, I knew which way you were going. So Anthony Richardson, how does your evaluation process change when you look at a player like him that has all these tools, but didn't really have a lot of pro talent around him like CJ Stroud, didn't win a lot of games consistently like Bryce Young, and a lot of people point out doesn't have the experience as a starting quarterback. So how do you project something like that to the next level?
Well, I think it begins with it when you're building an evaluation process for players, that what you're looking at is you're trying to project towards the NFL. So you watch a lot of NFL, and then you define things in writing in a manner where you're looking at specific skills and traits that are as much as possible independent of the surrounding talent or talent that you're facing opposite you. Now, it can be problematic when you're, say, playing FCS or Division III and you're trying to project to the NFL. That's understandable. But I found over the years, especially, I look at positions like even like running back, like with guys like Matt Forte, when I watched him play an LSU national championship team where there was one guy on Tulane that could out bench press everybody. I mean, anybody on the LSU team. Like, there were guys on special teams that could out bench press everybody on that Tulane team. And Matt Forte's box score performance was horrific, but I came away with a huge grade of him. So really, when you're looking at, I can think of Joseph Adai, Ahmad Bradshaw, guys like that. Even when looking at quarterbacks, the same thing is that when you study those players, what you're looking at are things that project well the NFL. Because in contrast, you can look at things like completion percentage, and people often look at completion percentage and they don't realize that when you chart a play, that's different than looking at a box score. So I chart quarterback throws, and I chart it against what I define as NFL caliber moments, in terms of touch, accuracy. Is it catchable accuracy? And to me, that's something that's, whether it's something that the receiver has in a reasonable shot of catching, not a difficult catch where I expect that it's not catchable or shouldn't be considered catchable, but they catch the ball anyway. And while he has some accuracy issues based on his footwork, they're correctable types of things. The things that just went off the film and just slapped you in the face and said, this guy can be special, is not the running. That's the case for 99% of what people are viewing. But if you're really charting plays, what you see is, okay, he's not just manipulating safeties. He's manipulating linebackers and flat defenders and cornerbacks, and he's doing it on the move, and he's placing the ball only where the receiver can catch it. He's making Josh Justin Herbert throws, layering the ball over linebackers after manipulating them to create the space and fitting it into triangles of coverage that are really tight. And he's doing it while moving in the pocket or moving and flushing and rolling to his right. He's integrating skills that if you know, for years, if you go to big draft and go, oh, Mitchell Trubisky, what's he good at? Well, he's really good at being able to maneuver. Look how he manipulated this defender on this one play. Look how he did this on another play. Look how he did on the and you're going to hear this on every big, 3 and 4 letter network and big draft this year about singular things they show on one play as opposed to doing 3 or 4 of those things at once on one play. So sure, is he going to miss cover 2 and have a pick 6? Yes. Is he not going to recognize certain things and look horrific trying to make a heroic throw with a defender in his chest because he's got a 10 RAS score and he's a big, strong dude who thinks he can do it like Matt Stafford did over a decade ago? Absolutely. And in 3 years, he's going to be the best quarterback in this class, if you ask me, because the things that you can't teach him, that you can't teach these other players to integrate because they haven't shown it by now, if you're not integrating at this speed, if you don't have these ingrained things at this speed, it's unlikely that you're going to acquire them and then bring them into your game. But if you already have them, and all you've got to do is see cover 2 a little more often, all you've got to do is to learn not to be the hero in this situation. And all you've got to do is learn a little bit of footwork with your drops. I'm taking that guy.
So, Matt, you are going with Anthony Richardson here over Bryce Young. Long story short. And Jordan, you are up now. Who do we have? Anthony Richardson or Bryce Young?
I am going with Anthony Richardson as well. It's true that Anthony Richardson isn't the quote-unquote raw prospect, and the one thing that stood out to me in his film is his pocket awareness. I was surprised to see how well he moved in the pocket. There's a few throws he made against Tennessee that were just unreal. Bryce Young can't do that. CJ Stroud can't do it. And those are things that I love when I see a quarterback, because pocket awareness is going to be a huge thing for a guy like him, where he can run. So if he escapes that pocket in the NFL, he's gone. There's not many things he's going to not be able to do right away. And from a fantasy point of view, he's a willing runner. I know he likes it. I know that he enjoys running in through people. He can do it all in terms of the quarterback position. I hope he kind of is a person that stays or gets put into a right spot with a coach that's going to be willing to work with him and a staff that stays together, because I think that is a crucial thing for a quarterback like this. It can't be a situation where he's changing quarterbacks, coordinators, or quarterbacks coach each year. It needs to be what Josh Allen was brought into, where he had Dable and I believe he had Ken Dorsey for his first 4 years in the NFL. It took a little bit. It took them to get, Stephon Diggs instead of having Kelvin Benjamin. For Cam Newton, he had Ron Rivera. He had Ken Dorsey as well. And I believe we made a move in year 2, but Cam Newton was a more refined prospect than Anthony Richardson is at this point. But overall, I love Richardson for fantasy. I think he's my quarterback 1.
Gentlemen, let's move on here to quarterback 3, where we've got Bryce Young or Will Levis. Matt, once again, I'm going to let you start first.
Well, listen, I'm happy with all 3 of the top quarterbacks in this class in terms of being prospects. So if someone said to me that Bryce Young, who's my number 3, would be has production better than any of the other 2 that we've already discussed, wouldn't be shocked by that if he's in the right offense. To me, people worry about his size, but I look at a guy like Kyler Murray, and I would say that while he's not as fast as Kyler Murray or as good of a runner as Kyler Murray, he's a far better pocket manager than Kyler Murray, who we've all seen it. Yeah, Kyler Murray can extend a play for 8 seconds. That's great. His receivers now have to reroute several times. There were multiple times before he extended it for 8 seconds that he could have made just an efficient movement and gotten rid of the ball. But instead, the head goes down, the ball goes, way behind him, and he runs to a spot. So now he has to reset his feet, get the ball back into position, and then get his eyes downfield. And by the time that happened, whoever was open is no longer open again. So now he's got to do it again and again and again. And that looks great on a 4-letter network. but it doesn't look great. It doesn't look great when you're talking about wins and losses in the scoreboard and efficiency. And Bryce Young has been doing since high school which is the opposite of Kyler Murray, which is moving efficiently and getting rid of the ball quickly and being able to make simple solutions out of difficult circumstances. And when I look at Bryce Young, yeah, there's a concern one bad hit, but you could say that Carson Palmer's career changed forever on one bad hit, and he was the prototypical quarterback if you ever saw one. So I'm a huge fan of Bryce Young, and when you look at those skills, the processing, the pocket feel, the management, it's all there.
See, I love the context that you provide here. There's a bit of nuance to how quarterbacks extend plays. And I know that's become one of the new sexy traits, right? Josh Allen can extend plays. Lamar Jackson extends plays. But there is something to be said about a guy like Bryce Young who can keep the calm within the craziness. Jordan, you went the same direction here, Bryce Young. So I've got a question for you because Matt touched on this a little bit, and it's something that has been talked about every single time Bryce Young gets brought up. He's small. It's not an intangible thing. Like, we see it. He's small. He's short. He doesn't weigh a lot. His weight at the combine is probably not his real weight. Like, he had a really big breakfast. If he's successful in the NFL, he is by every means an outlier. Some analysts have him as a top quarterback. Some have him as QB3 or even lower. Is there a scenario for you, Jordan, where Bryce Young can catapult up into being the top quarterback in this draft? Or is that really not even that big of a gap right now?
It's not that big of a gap right now. I think the perfect landing spot for fantasy and kind of where I see Bryce Young going would be the Lions if he somehow fell to them or they moved up to go get him, just because I know that Amon-Ra and Jameson
You're talking
Williams,
dirty to me, man. You're talking so dirty to me. Bryce Young and Jameson Williams getting back together. Oh, that's the couple we need.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, everybody compares Bryce Young similar to like Steph Curry in a way. I think he's more like Jason Kidd or someone that's just controlling an offense. And he needs to be in a situation where he can do that. He can't go to a team that doesn't have talent around him and kind of turn water into wine sort of sense, because he's not that style of player. His last year at Alabama, he had the most rushing yards because of his ability, or the ability that these receivers didn't have at getting open. At Alabama, he was great when he had the guys. When they took him away, he wasn't as special, and it showed up in some games. Bryce Young still is an unbelievable player. I have no doubt in my mind that he will be a good pro. He's going to be an outlier just because there's not many guys built like him. And Waldman touched on, his size. I'm not worried about it because the way he throws. His arm is much higher, like, release point than it is some of the, like, his size in terms of some guys. Like, I think it was Joe Flacco or Brock Osweiler had the most batted down balls of any quarterback in a single season. They're 6'6", 6'7". Bryce Young doesn't really get passes batted down, even though he is really small, because he throws it at a higher release point and over guys into certain windows. I think he's going to be fine. I think for fantasy, it'll take going to the Lions for me to kind of bump him up. Like, if he ends up with the Texans, and even if they take JSN with their 12th overall pick, still not quite there for me just yet. I think that that's a spot where it's realistic for him, but it's going to be a difficult approach to pass Richardson because of just the ceiling. And for me, with quarterback, I want ceiling, not necessarily safe play. I'd rather go for the Patrick Mahomes style of guy than someone who just turns into a just good quarterback.
Weird thing for us on today's episode, we have referenced one too many basketball players, probably the most on any Pretend GM episode. So that's a nice little milestone that we've hit here. I'm also going with Bryce Young. That was a clean sweep there, and I don't think that surprises anyone that we went Bryce Young over Will Levis here. So Will Levis now moves down to the quarterback 4 discussion, where we are going to pit him against Hendon Hooker. Check out the audio version of this show, where we always have an extra 20 plus minutes of bonus content. This video is going to be a lot shorter than what we do on the audio version, so you won't see that stuff here on YouTube. You can click the link in the description, or just go to wherever you get your podcast and search Pretend GM.